The moment Daniel Carter saw her walk through the restaurant doors, his chest tightened, not with desire, but with a deep, unsettling confusion that felt like the ground beneath his life was shifting once again. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that change lives when we least expect them, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because stories like this don't just belong to one man, they belong to all of us who have ever been broken and tried to rebuild. Daniel Carter had not been on a date in 6 years. 6 long, heavy years filled with sleepless nights, unpaid bills, school lunches made at dawn, and whispered lullabies to a child who didn't fully understand why her mother was gone. His daughter, Emily Carter, had become the center of his universe the day his wife passed away after a sudden illness that tore through their lives like a storm with no warning. Since then, Daniel had lived in survival mode, working as a mid-level analyst in a towering corporate office, quietly fading into the background of a world that moved too fast for a grieving heart. His boss, Alexander Hayes, was everything Daniel was not: confident, commanding, the kind of CEO whose presence alone could silence a room. But beneath that polished exterior, Alexander had been watching Daniel closely. He had noticed the way Daniel stayed late not for promotion, but to avoid going home to an empty apartment filled with echoes. He had noticed the tired smile, the worn-out shirts, the quiet dignity of a man doing his best with what little he had left. And one day, without warning, Alexander called him into his office and told him he had arranged a date. Daniel had refused at first. The idea felt wrong, almost like a betrayal to the memory of the woman he had loved with his whole soul. But Alexander insisted, not with authority, but with something rare, genuine care. He told Daniel that life was not meant to be endured alone, that love does not disappear when someone dies, it changes shape, and that Emily deserved to see her father smile again. Eventually, with a hesitant heart and trembling hands, Daniel agreed. And now, here he was, sitting at a small table by the window, his fingers nervously tracing the edge of a glass of water as the world outside blurred into streaks of light. When the woman finally arrived, everything inside him froze. Her name was Sophia Bennett. She was not what he expected. Not in the way she looked, though she was undeniably striking, but in the way she carried something fragile behind her eyes, something broken yet fiercely alive. She walked toward him slowly, as if every step required courage, as if showing up here tonight meant confronting something she had been running from for a long time. But what happened next shook Daniel to his core. As she sat down, her composure cracked, not in a dramatic or inappropriate way, but in a deeply human one. Her hands trembled, her breathing faltered, and before she could even greet him properly, she leaned forward, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of emotion. It was not seduction. It was not intention. It was grief, raw, unfiltered, and impossible to hide. She whispered his name, not with desire, but with a strange familiarity that confused him. Tears welled up in her eyes, and in that moment, Daniel realized something was terribly wrong, or perhaps, strangely right. Sophia wasn't there for a date. She was there because she knew him. Not Daniel Carter the employee. Not Daniel Carter the single father. But Daniel Carter the man who had once, unknowingly, saved her life. Years ago, on a rainy night Daniel barely remembered, he had stopped his car on a dark road after seeing a woman sitting alone on the curb, soaked and trembling. He had offered her his jacket, called a cab, and stayed with her until she was safe. He never asked her name. He never told anyone. To him, it was just a small act of kindness. To Sophia, it was the moment she decided not to give up on life. She had been at her lowest that night, battling depression, loss, and a sense of worthlessness that had nearly consumed her. Daniel's quiet presence, his refusal to leave her alone in the dark, had been the thread that pulled her back from the edge. She spent years rebuilding herself, becoming stronger, rediscovering purpose. And when Alexander Hayes, who happened to be her mentor and distant relative, mentioned a struggling employee named Daniel Carter, she recognized the name instantly. This date was never about romance. It was about gratitude. It was about two broken people meeting at a crossroads neither of them had planned. As the evening unfolded, something extraordinary began to happen. The tension dissolved, replaced by a fragile honesty. Daniel spoke about Emily, about the nights he cried quietly so she wouldn't hear, about the guilt of even considering happiness again. Sophia listened, not with pity, but with understanding. She shared her own battles, her own darkness, and the long road back to light. Two strangers, bound by a moment from the past, began to see each other not as saviors or victims, but as equals. Weeks turned into months, and what started as an awkward, emotionally overwhelming meeting slowly grew into something deeper. Sophia began visiting Daniel and Emily, first as a friend, then as someone who became part of their daily lives. Emily, who had built walls around her heart, slowly began to trust again. Daniel, who had buried his feelings under layers of responsibility, found himself laughing, genuinely, freely, for the first time in years. But healing is never a straight path. There were nights Daniel pulled away, afraid of losing again. There were days Sophia doubted whether she deserved this new chapter. The past lingered, whispering fears into their minds. Yet, every time they stumbled, they chose to stay. They chose to try. And that choice changed everything. Alexander Hayes watched from a distance, knowing he had done something far greater than arranging a simple date. He had set two souls on a path toward healing, a path neither of them could have walked alone. So if this story is touching something inside your heart right now, don't just sit quietly, engage with it. Like the video, share it with someone who might need a reminder that hope still exists, and let your voice be heard in the comments. And before we reach the end, take a moment, just one, and comment something meaningful, maybe a place, a memory, or even just one word that describes how you feel right now. Because stories like Daniel and Sophia's are not just about love. They are about timing. About unseen connections. About the quiet ways we save each other without even realizing it. In the end, Daniel Carter did go on a date. But what he found was not what he expected. He found a reason to live again. He found a woman who didn't complete him, but reminded him he was never truly broken. And in the soft, ordinary moments of their shared life, surrounded by laughter, tears, and the gentle voice of a little girl calling them both home, Daniel finally understood something he had been searching for all along. Sometimes, the most unexpected encounters carry the power to heal the deepest wounds, and sometimes, the love we think we lost forever is simply waiting to return in a different form.